Hi everyone, so I wanted to share with you my expectations for the upcoming Olympus E-M5 Mark III, and then also make a little side comment on the discontinuation of the Olympus Pen F. So before I get into the list of things that I want or what my expectations are for this camera, I really wanted to talk about what's on the market already, because that I think will really help explain what my expectations are, why they are what they are. And the three cameras I want to talk about are really the current Olympus E-M1 Mark II, the E-M1X, and then also the Panasonic GH5. Because I think at this point it's pretty common knowledge that these three cameras are going to be using the same sensor. It's I believe it's a Sony IMX272 or something. Well, whatever it is, it's the same sensor, and the E-M5 Mark III is supposed to be getting this sensor as well. And I think it's really tempered a lot of expectations that people have had for this camera. But personally, that doesn't bother me. I'm excited that they're going to be using this sensor in the E-M5 Mark III because it's really an excellent sensor. I think the biggest impact on camera technology is not necessarily the sensor so much, but it's really in the CPU, because our cameras are basically computers now. And the E-M5 Mark II has the TruePic 7, the E-M1 Mark II has the TruePic 8, as well as the E-M1X has two TruePic 8s, and then Panasonic, whatever CPU they use, I don't know what they call it. I'm not a Panasonic guy. But I do know that the Panasonic really has superior video capabilities to anything Olympus has right now. Clearly, even though it has the same sensor, because we know these sensors, are capable of 4K 60 or whatever, even faster, I think, on the GH5, and 422 10-bit output. But Olympus went another direction. They focus more on the photography side. So we have the 60 frame per second RAW, we have the Pro Capture, we have a lot of speed and better focusing in our Olympus cameras than the Panasonic version. With the current technology and CPUs in these cameras, they had to kind of choose and pick what capabilities they wanted their cameras to have, because these things need to be hardwired into the CPU. It's not a simple firmware upgrade to add 4K 60 or 422 10-bit output. These things have to be hardwired into the CPU engine, regardless of what the sensor is capable of. And that's what Panasonic did, is they focused more on the video side and added these features, and obviously Olympus went the other way. But I think that also explains why, say, the Panasonic G9, which is Panasonic's version of the E-M1 Mark II, really, they came out like a year later, and all they did was kind of catch up to what the E-M1 Mark II did already. But you can see that they had to kind of cripple the video features a little bit, and I'm not so sure that it was a marketing thing so that they didn't want to take away sales from the GH5. I think it's partially has to do with the fact that the CPU or the technology that they have now is not capable of doing it all in one camera like that. Just my theory, but I think it will explain a lot of things about a lot of our cameras today, because like the TruePic 7 engine in our Pan Fs and E-M5 Mark IIs and E-M10 Mark II, we're never going to see 4K video in those. It's certainly not 4K 24, 4K 30, 4K. It's just not going to happen. But it's why cameras like the TG5, which has the TruePic 8 processor, can do 4K 6 or 4K 30 and 4K 24. I think 4K 30 only. But in any case, TG5 has 4K video. So, the camera tech has a lot to do with the processing engine, and that leads me to what my expectations are for the E-M5 Mark II. To add any additional capability to the camera, they're going to have to get a new processor. And unlike the E-M1X, which has two TruePic 8s, you know, they can't do that in a compact camera that they want the E-M5 Mark III to be. And that also explains why the E-M1X doesn't have 4K 60 in it. Because even with two TruePic 8 processors in it, they are still not able to generate enough CPU or horsepower in those CPUs to force a 4K 60 video into it, or add capabilities like 4.2 to 10-bit output. It was just never hard-coded or hardwired into the CPU. So the E-M5 Mark III will have to have a new CPU to be competitive, at the very least. And that's why the processor, or I'm sorry, the sensor has very little impact, I think, on the feature set of the camera. Another feature that I think will be added into the E-M5 Mark III is a better viewfinder and or a better live view screen, the screen on the back of the camera, because that is also CPU dependent. The TruePic 8 and TruePic 7 were never designed to have, you know, 3, 4, 5 megapixel EVFs. So they could probably firmware update it to handle something like that and do that in the E-M1X, but it would have slowed the camera down and or drained too much battery to do that. So that's why I think the E-M1X didn't get a better EVF. You know, Olympus played it off as, you know, they want to have a higher refresh rate so that you can have better sports action type live view or EVF capability. And that's probably true, because the TruePic 8 processor was designed for that particular EVF, and that's why the M1X has the same live view screen and EVF as the E-M1 Mark II, because that's what the TruePic 8 processor can do well. It's been hardwired into it. They're not going to be able to just firmware update to handle a better EVF and better live view screen without slowing the camera down and or draining the battery faster. Another capability I think that we're going to get is obviously the video side. The 4K 60, the 422 10-bit output, you know, and keep the fully articulating screen. So these things on the video side are going to be much improved over anything else Olympus has right now, including E-M1X and E-M1 Mark II. It has to be, because everything at this price point, I mean, I imagine this camera is going to be $1,200, $1,300, can already do these kinds of things. You know, XT3, Sony's, obviously, you know, all of these things, and for a little bit more, they can do a lot more, right? You know, if you step up to GH5, GH5S, etc., with the same sensor, right? All we need is a better CPU, a TruePic 9. So the TruePic 9 is going to make all of these things possible. And then they'll probably throw in, you know, handheld high-res shot mode. They'll probably throw in additional focus stacking capability, maybe focus stacking in RAW, because right now I think it's all JPEG. And maybe even faster RAW capture and Pro capture and additional focusing modes like in the E-M1X. So hopefully a lot of the features that we see in the E-M1X will easily trickle down to the E-M5 Mark III because of that new processor. They're not going to need two TruePic 8s to get, you know, what is it, the learning, you know, the planes, trains, automobile type autofocus. I think the E-M5 Mark III should be able to do that if they have a newer, faster processor that's more efficient, has a lot of these things hardwired in. Unlike the E-M1X, they had to double the TruePic 8s and or probably add more memory to the motherboard of this camera to be able to have all of this machine learning or whatever it is they call it. And those are the core things I think the E-M5 Mark III are my base minimum expectations for this camera. Now, is that enough to make it competitive? I think it's enough to give it a good momentum in the beginning. I don't know if long term they're going to really put a dent or expand their market share if they only do those things. they're really going to have to come up with something new, a surprise. And I recommend you check out, if you haven't seen it already, because I think he did this a month ago, is Peter Forsgaard video on like 10 or 11 things Olympus needs to do. And they were all excellent ideas, and I think if Olympus can do those things, you know, all the better for us, right? But I think realistically, we're not going to get most of those things. Like I think he mentioned being able to download apps and things for our camera. Olympus is not going to do that. I mean, you know, there's two big hurdles there, right? One is just the perception from the consumer. It's like, if the camera's capable of doing this already, why do I have to download an app? Why didn't you just build it into the software, give us a firmware update? Why do I got to get an app or pay for an app? And it's not going to be a free app, because you're not going to have ads on your camera. That would be the end of Olympus if they start putting ads in their camera, like these free apps you get on your phone. So you're going to have to pay for them. And they might offer a few free apps, you know, like you know, different art filters and things like Sony did. But Sony made a big mistake, and they ran into the same problem where, you know, they didn't include an intervalometer on their cameras, but you could pay $5 and get one, or was it $10? Yeah, they caught a lot of flack for that, and I'm sure they still do. And I think it's why a lot of their cameras now don't even have that play memory store capability anymore, because there's that perception at the consumer level of, you know, if the camera's capable, just include it. Why have it separate? And it adds to the cost of the camera in terms of additional memory storage and things like that. But the other hurdle that Olympus is going to have with adding apps to a camera is they're going to have to open up their platform or all their secret sauce to programmers, you know, anyone that wants to make an app for it, and by extension their competitors as well. And I'm sure they don't want to share all of that hard work, you know, R&D, proprietary information with everyone and their competitors, just so that they can have this app capability. So I think these are two really big barriers to having apps on the camera. Another thing he mentioned, I think, was I should have watched that video again before making this one, but was the star trails thing. You know, we have like the live view, live composite, so we can do star trails easily. But he was talking about star tracking, something that Pentax has been doing that I didn't realize, where the sensor will move along with the stars, so you get pin sharp stars in your astrophotography. And they do that by tying it into the GPS into the camera, and then controlling, you know, the sensor movement to follow the stars. And that was really fascinating. I think if Olympus could do that, I think that's definitely within the capability of the camera if they throw in GPS. Now, if that kills the battery life, forget it. You know, I'll just go buy a Pentax for that one single thing maybe, or buy a star tracker. You know, they got these ones now for like $300 that are really good. But yeah, if you're going to kill my battery life for the 99% of other things I do with it just to have this one feature, yeah, forget it. You know, the GPS and the star tracking stuff. But that would be kind of cool if they were able to add that without killing the battery, and if they can do it without adding GPS, because I think it can be done even without GPS through software with their new CPU that they're going to put into this. Because, you know, we have focus stacking in the camera already, and eliminating that egg shape that you get with the stars when you leave the shutter open too long is done in software now through focus stacking in software in post. And I think it's something they could probably add to the camera, where it'll calculate an image at one point in time, stop, take another picture, reanalyze, and shift the sensor all in camera. That's something they can do easily, I think, not too dissimilar from their focus stacking and HDR modes. They wouldn't even need GPS. And I think those are the things, as a minimum, Olympus has to do to have any momentum for this camera at launch, for it to do well. And then hopefully it catches on, and people really get into the Olympus system and see how wonderful these cameras are, because it's not a big seller here in the US apparently. Which leads me to the discontinuation of the Pen F. That really saddened me. You know, I wish, if they're not going to come out with a Model 2, don't discontinue the Model 1. It's still a great camera. You know, a few firmware updates away from being a stellar camera. One thing I'd like to see them add is in the color wheel, instead of, or in addition to changing the saturation of each color, it would be awesome if they could put a firmware in there that would let us change the hue of each color. And now we're talking about being really creative with this camera in terms of taking, you know, images and simulating different film looks and things like that. Or whatever else, you know, you can think of creatively, but being able to change the hue of colors would be a tremendous upgrade for the Pen F. So please do that, Olympus, in a firmware update. It's something I think you could probably easily do.